Hi, I'm Skip Nipper. Welcome to my podcast, where I tell you about not only Nashville's great baseball history and traditions,
shot to right, a one-hop liner,
but certainly about its past. And you will hear a little bit about its present and future, too.
Yes, he can. It makes the waist-high catch.
There are great stories about Tom Wilson Park, Herschel Greer Stadium, Sulphur Dell, and the players, coaches, and fans who love everything about baseball. And every once in a while, you will get to hear from a special guest who will share their fondness and even passion for the great game.
It's a high fly ball down the right field corner, going way back, hits a lead-off home run.
For those of you who are listening, I want to introduce you to someone who I admire because he's a historian. He does a lot of work in the 19th century realm of baseball. That's two words back in the 19th century. He's a historian, an educator, a vintage baseball player. Once again, two words, baseball. Yes, baseball is always going to be two words as far as we're concerned back in the old days, and it comes around later to one word. He's a web developer and a contributor to the history of the 19th century game. And his name is Chris Ryland. You said I could call you Chris. And sir, let me tell you, thank you for being on my podcast. I'm grateful.
Thank you for inviting me.
Yeah. Well, tell me about you, because I don't know a lot about you, but we've known each other for some time. Tell me where you're from and what you do and where you are in Nashville.
So I'm not originally from Nashville. I was born in Denmark. My mother was Danish. My father was American. We moved to the States when I was very young. And we moved all around up and down the East Coast. And but I've been here. I tell people I'm from Atlanta because it's the easiest, and that's where I went to high school. But I've lived here in Nashville for over 25 years. So I've been here longer than many residents. I am a librarian by profession. I'm a rare book librarian and archivist, and I work with history of medicine. So nothing specifically to do with baseball for a living, but I enjoy history. A lot of my work has to do with the history, as I said. So it sort of dovetails in with sort of my feel for things that are older, things that are lesser known today.
It's a challenge, isn't it, sometimes, right?
Yeah.
So at some point you became interested in this 19th century history. And was it baseball that took you there? Because we'll get into that a little bit more too. Or have you always been interested in that time period?
So I've always been a baseball fan. My father introduced me to baseball when I was about, before I can remember. And as I said, we lived in various different places. At the time I fell in love with baseball, we were living in New York State. My father was a Cleveland fan. And because of him, I knew that the Yankees were not an option for me. And so I had to pick my own team, and I picked the Baltimore Orioles, probably because of the cartoon bird and the colors. But I just absolutely fell in love with baseball, and the Orioles were my team. And so I've always been interested in baseball history. I loved the book The Glory of Their Times by Lawrence Ritter was one of the books I read when I was 8 or 9 years old. And I just love the idea and the stories and the people of early baseball. I was never specifically interested in the time period of the 1860s or 1870s. That was never something that I read a lot about until I was introduced to vintage baseball. And that's when I started learning more about the period that we played in. The rules that we were playing by in that period.
And those rules are from approximately what year?
1866. Well, I think we were playing 1864 rules.
Yeah. But you could throw a ball at a runner and hit him in like dodgeball and he'd be out in those days. They don't do that there though, right?
Well, it depends on the rules that you're playing by. So we were playing by, in vintage baseball, the New York rules, which no longer allowed for soaking a runner with a ball. So a little bit more civilized.
Yeah, but no gloves.
No gloves. of you could catch the ball on a bound, and that rule was changed in the 1860s. So we picked 1864 because some of the more unathletic types, such as myself, it made it easier for us to participate if you could catch the ball in one bounce and then the runner would be out. So there are a few different rules, but it's still recognizable as baseball from today.
Yeah.
But when I started playing, I realized that I didn't know that much about. I thought of myself as a amateur baseball historian in a way, but I didn't know that much about that period. So that's why I thought I realized there was a hole in my knowledge of the game.
I was always impressed with the caliber of play. And even for those who were not accustomed to playing either by those rules or even playing the game itself. And as time went on, there were even women who came on board. It was known as a gentleman's game, but also a ladies' game as things progressed. But the caliber of play for those who have never seen a vintage baseball game played, I think the regular season is over, but there's getting ready to be a Sulphurdale Cup, and I'm not sure where. I think that's being played in Chattanooga over a weekend in a few weeks. If anybody would want to see that or see any of these other match games that may come up in the fall, it's quite an energetic time, isn't it, for a couple of hours?
It is, and it's fun. A lot of us have not played baseball since, or I'm not playing. I haven't played in a few years. I was in the league for about 8 or 9 years, but I haven't been able to play the last few years. But one of the wonderful things about vintage baseball is it allows those of us who haven't played for a while to get back in the game without the ball is pitched underhanded, sort of like softball. And that was one of the rules at the time, that it had to be thrown underhanded. And that makes it easier for us to hit the ball. And like I said, the bound rule made it easier for us to catch the ball. And we don't play with gloves. So it's a little bit easier than some of the other adult baseball leagues. And so I think that's a draw to some of those that are, past the age when we have the reflexes or the speed or the other athletic gifts of the young.
The caliber of play can also be measured by the caliber of injuries. Now, I don't mean people are going to go out there and get injured. I mean, for example, there's no sliding because we don't want anybody getting injured in games. You can't run past first base, for example, without being touched for an out. But I'm always, once again, the caliber of play and the injuries that come with that, it's just something you have to take on. So you have to be dedicated, I guess is what I want to say. You have to be dedicated to want to play that game pretty hard.
Well, you do. And some of I'm amazed, or was amazed, still am, by the people who have surprising talents. Sometimes people who maybe don't realize that they have a certain skill. Catching the ball barehanded is a skill that most people don't really practice, throwing a baseball and catching it barehanded. And then they realize this is something that they can do that they never realized that they were good at. And so they end up being the first baseman, because the first baseman has to receive balls thrown pretty hard and be able to catch them barehanded. And that can hurt, that can lead to injuries. And that's something that I never knew that I could do, or other people never realized that they could do. And it's an interesting, different set of skills from regular baseball.
Well, what about the camaraderie?
That's the best part of it, is making friends that have the common interest in baseball and the history of the game, and spending an afternoon with them, or going out afterwards, and meeting new people and their families. And you mentioned the tournament, the annual tournament with there's a banquet, and it just provides a lot of opportunity to celebrate baseball and celebrate the history of baseball with people who feel the same way.
Did you find in your research that it's the same today for people, men and women playing vintage baseball? Is it the same as it was back then? I mean, the camaraderie, the the challenge of playing a game, the will to win. What was that the same as it is today?
Well, it depends. I mean, it baseball. The baseball research that I've done here in Nashville showed that when Nashville was first established here in 1866, baseball was first made here in 1866. There was a focus on the gentlemanliness of the game. The focus on, as you say, sort of more of the camaraderie and the play for its own sake. But that changed over the next several years, where it became more competitive. And that's one of the things when we established the Tennessee Association of Vintage Baseball. One of the sort of founding principles that we had was that we did not want to make it too competitive. Many of the people in the league are used to playing baseball in high school, little league, maybe even college, and so everybody wants to win. Everybody has a passion for winning, and that's one of the sort of instincts that we tried to tamp down a little bit, because emotions can get high. People can get angry, especially if you depend on the players to decide if somebody is out or safe. Those basic kinds of decisions that require a little bit of objective approach to the game that's not always available in the moment. In vintage baseball, we have umpires, but the umpires, there's one umpire, can't always see what's happening. Often the fielder and the runner may not agree on who is safe or who is out. So that is one of the things we tried to focus on, that even if you think the call was wrong, try to be fair, try not to get too upset about it. It is just a game. And in my research, I realized that this, as I said before, this was a challenge back in 1866 as well, that right. People become a little bit hot-headed, a little bit upset, and so there were other folks there to try to cool down the temperature. But at the same time, there was also that feeling of camaraderie.
In your research, you have contributed to a couple of, well, more than two. I was going to say two, but one of the websites that's just a tremendous resource for baseball enthusiasts is protoball.org, protoball.org. Have I got that right?
Yes.
Which you contribute to quite well, and you have done a lot of that in the realm of Tennessee and certainly Nashville baseball. So anybody that wants to learn more, sometimes we get overwhelmed with how many different things there are to go to. But by George, if you want to find something from the 19th century baseball realm, you can go there and find it. And then you began a WordPress site called threehandsdead.wordpress.com, where you have taken some of those things and published them themselves. Has that been an enjoyable task for you?
Oh, absolutely. One of my favorite things about researching early baseball is identifying the people who were involved in the game, and the names of the teams and how they were formed, and when they played, where they played. A lot of these little details that seem sort of insignificant, but when you look at them in a larger context, you start to learn more about the meaning of baseball at the time, and the context the context where baseball came from, and what these other people were doing around baseball, not just in their clubs or founding their clubs, but they were also newspapermen or politicians or bankers or businessmen or railway clerks. And it's sort of fun to go back and look at how ordinary people interacted with baseball before the professional game came to Tennessee.
Did the Civil War have anything to do with that?
It did. The end of the Civil War was the turning point in really bringing baseball to Nashville and much of the South. Before the Civil War, there were some baseball clubs in the South, usually in coastal cities, Louisiana and Georgia, maybe, or maybe in edge cities or Midwestern cities where like Louisville had a team. But in places like Tennessee, most of North Carolina, Georgia, what we think of now as being the South, there were very, very few organized baseball clubs. But during the Civil War, the Union soldiers brought baseball to the South. They played baseball in cities, they played them in camps, they played them in prison, played baseball in prisons. And that exposed many of the people who had been living in the South, both black and white, to the game of baseball, separate from maybe other ball and bat games that they had been playing more casually. And then after the war, many of these Union soldiers came and settled in places like Nashville, Chattanooga, Knoxville. And then as a part of that, and probably like we're going back looking for camaraderie, as we mentioned before, looking for that sense of maybe that sense of belonging that they had come to be exposed to in the Army, they established baseball clubs. And at that point in 1866 and 1867 especially, baseball just boomed in the South like it had everywhere else in the country.
And the Union soldiers that came here in the South came because of the war, but they didn't bring baseball to teach baseball. They brought baseball as a recreational activity. And from that, it kind of developed into being able to teach local citizens, I think, what the game was all about, right?
Yes, and it developed into a competition. We talked about competitiveness. We had, teams wanting to be the champion club, teams wanting to be the best team in the state, the best team in the county, the best team in the region, eventually in the country. So there was this idea of trying to get better to the smaller towns, represent a business, represent important local figures. Some of these clubs were named after people. Some of them were named after hotels. Some of them were named after popular brands at the time, even.
Yeah, yeah. What about black baseball? What about the Negro population? They played also. They wanted to play the game as well, didn't they?
They did, and unfortunately, we don't know as much about black baseball in Tennessee as we do about white baseball, and that is because the sources that we have, most of the sources that I had were like I was saying before, were newspapers, and most of the newspapers at the time were white newspapers, did not cover black baseball extensively, and so every now and then we see a glimpse of what black baseball looked like here in Nashville or in Tennessee. But we know that as early as 1866 and 1867, that black Nashvillians were organizing themselves into teams. And we also have one club called the Excelsior Club of Nashville that was publishing notices in the white newspapers challenging the local clubs to a match. And in one case, they challenged called out the Phoenix Club by name to a match, but that there's no evidence that ever happened. We can see that there was enthusiasm among all the demographics, and then by the late 1860s, there were tournaments being held for black teams here in Nashville. So it was popular among everyone.
Yeah, we can see junior teams, we can see women's teams, we can see it from all the demographics. The Nashville demographics. There's a name that I've run into roadblocks on, and I think you mentioned it in your WordPress site. His name is Herman Sandhouse. Now, if you're like me, that kind of ends. He's reported to have brought part of the northern game to Nashville. And there's a Sandhouse Supply, I think men's clothing or something, I can't remember. And then he disappears. He moves to Burns, Tennessee or somewhere. It's kind of hard to know through Ancestry and other sources whether that's him or not. Do you know anything more about Herman Sandhouse?
I know him from a newspaper article that's published many decades after the fact, reminiscing about the birth of baseball in Nashville. Some of the details from that article don't quite match up with what we know from contemporary sources, but it does underscore and confirm the idea that it was the northern ex-soldiers who had moved to Nashville, also northern businessmen who had moved to Nashville, organized and brought these clubs to and brought the competition to Nashville.
One thing that you came across recently, and I find it fascinating, is about a game being played where the winning team was presented with, was it a rosewood bat?
Yes.
Can you tell me a little bit about that? I know that's hard to find exactly the description of that game, but can you kind of fill me in on what that was all about?
Yeah, so as I mentioned before, there were matches played for the championship of the county. And when we talk about championships, it wasn't exactly like we have today, where everybody played the entire season. At the end of the season, the one club won. It was more like sort of in boxing, where the people, when one club wins the championship, and then that championship can switch several times over the course of a year, depending on who has won the latest match. But this was for the championship of Davidson County in 1866. And it was a rosewood bat that was presented by Mr. Andrew Luck, is the name of the person who presented the bat. And it was for the championship of the county, as I said, and it was going to be between the Stonewall Baseball Club and the Cumberland Baseball Club, which was also known as the Nashville Club at the time. And so the Cumberland Club won the bat. Won the match and the rosewood bat. And so this bat has been the subject of a lot of internet searches for me, a lot of questions about what happened to this bat. I've always assumed over the years that the bat had just disappeared because I could find no reference to it. So the idea behind the bat is that, like I said, it went to the champion. So the next club that became the champion defeated the Cumberland Club would get the bat, and then he would be sort of like a prize trophy that went from club to club. But that after 1866, the bat disappeared, and so I had no idea what happened to it. As a bit of background to the story about finding the bat, I wrote an article about Nashville baseball for a newsletter published by Sabre last winter. I think in February it came out, where I described some of what we've been talking about with the Nashville Club or Nashville baseball, those early days. And I got a little while later, I got a message from a man in upstate New York who said he had the bat. He said, "I have this bat."
Amazing.
And I was shocked. I thought, "There's no way this is a scam. There's no way anybody has this bat, that this bat still exists." But he sent me a picture of it, and he said that it had gone to auction a few years ago. And I'm sorry that I was unaware of that auction. I'm not a collector. I don't see these things, these auction listings. But he had acquired the bat from the person who had won the auction, and he sent me some pictures, and it said champion. It has a little tiny little plaque on it that says champion bat or something to that effect.
Yeah.
And it had been kept in the family of one of the members of the Cumberland Club.
Wow.
And we have so it had the provenance of the bat was attested to by the owner, and apparently the owner was a great granddaughter of the member of the club who had left town with the bat back in 1866 or 1867. And so this is I haven't seen the bat in person, but this is a wonderful concrete piece of evidence that links us to these events that we don't really have in other ways that we can point to, that anyone can touch, which is very exciting.
There has to be more out there, doesn't there?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. I have been searching for years trying to find more, balls or bats or gloves or photographs. I know they're out there.
Yeah.
I know they're in people's attics or have maybe gone to auction in our private collections, or pieces of baseball uniforms. Wouldn't that
Right.
be amazing?
Yeah.
Because these teams, they were serious. They had uniforms that were sewn for them with stylized letters and whatnot, and different pieces of cloth sewn together as uniforms. And so we know that there are hundreds of uniforms that were made in the 1860s, hundreds of balls that were used, hundreds of bats, I'm sure. But we just, and unless they have labels on them, I'm sure that the balls were played with, or unless they were trophies, they probably just, the same thing happened to all those balls that happened to my balls when I was played baseball when I was a kid. They got lost in the woods, I'm sure. But like you say, somewhere out there are other pieces of memorabilia that can connect us to these clubs.
Well, just as that rosewood bat, often the ball that was played with would have been presented to the winning team, and sometimes it had markings on it. You could see some of those at Cooperstown and other places you can see, and there's got to be more of those out there as well.
And sometimes they do turn up. There was one that showed up from the Battle of Shiloh battlefield some years ago that had someone had found it on the battlefield,
Right.
baseball, evidence that they were playing baseball on that field. And so you're right. I mean, there's got to be some out there, and I'm just waiting for the next person to send me a message or an email saying, I read your article, and I know or I saw your website, and here's something you might be interested in.
Now, see, what you've described is the thing that keeps us going, I think. I can sense the excitement in your voice. I feel the same thing, and it's got to be that way for so many others, too, that there's something else out there in a trunk in somebody's attic or basement. Hope that somebody finds it, locates it, and gets to it before it's just tossed. And too often, I think things like that are tossed. But it's important for us to keep those treasures, because if we don't, they'll get away, and they're no longer even a source of interest. So my cap's off to you for being able to run across that, to being able to publish that article. I mean, that all had to fall into place. So good for you for that.
Well, thank you. And that's just I started the blog probably 10 years ago, and it was just for my own enjoyment. And I was Googling 19th century baseball, and I came across Protoball, and I offered to participate, and I met some of the other people who were in the who were working on that, and I joined Sabre, met some of those other people as well. And so all of this is never anything that I set out to do. It was just fun little project. I like to do research and read on things and take notes and share with other people what I find, and just these happy accidents of that sharing process.
You have become an expert in it. I think people admire you for what you're doing. I do. We recently sat on a little get together at the East Tennessee History Museum, downtown Knoxville, because they put together an exhibit in conjunction with the opening of the new Knoxville Smokies ballpark. I think that exhibit is running maybe through September. I can't remember, and there's some hope that it'll be moved around to different parts. I really enjoyed being on that. I know it was a month long or longer time to get together and to put information out there. Did you enjoy that? I really did.
Oh, that was a lot of fun.
We meet some people that way too, and I think that's part of it. You talked about earlier about the camaraderie of ball players, the camaraderie of historians. It never ceases to amaze me that people you can shake their hand with or hear speak. There's never hardly any time that I haven't enjoyed it and always learned something.
I'll always learn something, and one of the things that I learn, some of these things that I learn, I think these are specialized details about the early days of baseball, and there's no way anybody knows this. And then you meet somebody who can just rattle them off the uh, top of their heads, and they're an expert in something that you did not know was possible. Like how did you possibly get this learn this information? And so just talking to fellow baseball historians, I'm always amazed by the work that they have done, and what they have shared with each other. And I hear stories about, from some of the people on our panel talking about they're texting each other late at night, sharing what they've learned with each other, from each other, and going down all these paths on the internet, doing searches, and in some of the reference sources that they have. So it's always impressive to me that I'm surrounded by really, really smart people who know so much more than I do on these topics. That project that we worked on was a lot of fun for me also, because I got to participate in something that was bigger than what I had been working on my blog. And so it's fun to go to the East Tennessee History Center and see some of my work being shared, not just on a website, but some of on these panels in this exhibition, and know that there were people coming to visit the exhibit, and being able to look at the posters and the panels, and being able to learn from those, what I had been researching at the State Library and Archives back in 2015 or something. Like I said, it never occurred to me that stuff would end up in an exhibit in Knoxville 10 years later.
And on a wider level, SABR, that's Society for American Baseball Research. For listeners, it's sabr.org. It's the best, I think, $65 a year that I spend. The research opportunities are just terrific, and I don't know what I would do without SABR.
Yeah, and SABR is wonderful for baseball research, not just because not just because of the local chapters, and meeting local historians, but also to realize that there are groups like the 19th century baseball group, that a section that published the newsletter that I was talking about earlier, and also other very specific sections dealing with things like women in baseball, or the earliest origins of the game, or statistics in baseball, or any aspect of the history over any time period. There's going to be a section, or there's going to be a group of people who are just as knowledgeable about those areas as you can imagine. And conventions and meetings and publications and websites, it's just an amazing group of people.
Yeah. So you join me in encouraging listeners to join SABR. I think it's just great. So sabr.org, once again. When did you start playing vintage baseball? Did you start that first year?
I did. I was one of the first on one of the first two teams. We had the Franklin Farriers and then the Maroons of Nashville.
Yeah.
We played at the Carnton in Franklin, and then we played at Bicentennial Mall in Nashville for that first year. And we had so much fun, and so many people enjoyed what we were doing, that it grew very quickly. And we very soon had teams in East Tennessee and all over Middle Tennessee as well.
Yeah, it's been a real treat. What everybody may not know, that everybody in vintage baseball has a name. In other words, if you are the striker and you come up, you are not called Chris, you were called
Books.
How appropriate is that?
Well, one of the rules that we had that is very hard to enforce, one of the rules that we had is that everybody had to have a nickname. but you couldn't give yourself a nickname. And so it had to be sort of an organically bestowed nickname. And so my first nickname was not Books. It was Dusty. That's because I'm an archivist, and people think of archives as being dusty, full of dust, and so I was Dusty. Never loved that name, but it's what I had to work with until another vintage player, Skeeter. His name is Skeeter Wells.
Oh yeah.
And one of the funny things about, just as an aside, one of the funny things about vintage baseball is that you meet people and you become good friends with them, and you know them by their nicknames, and you may never actually know their given name. It's just a nickname. But so Skeeter, like I said earlier, I'm a librarian as well as an archivist. And so he started calling me Books. And I thought, oh, Books, first of all, that's given to me by a fellow player. And I liked it. I liked it better than Dusty. So I said, well, from now on, I'm going to be Books. So that's how
Books.
I Books. Yeah.
I like Books. I think that's good. Are you working on anything special, or are you just kind of going on with your research as it comes?
The last few things I've done is just sort of trying to fill in some of the gaps. I realized that, going back and looking over over the research that I've done before, is there are some things that I've overlooked. Some matches that are not recorded, or maybe some people who have not been fully identified. So it's some of those little details that I realized that are missing, but I'm not having any big projects that I'm working on right now.
And if you did, you'd never be finished anyway. There's so much information out there, and they can't find everything, and different things keep coming up, right?
Yeah, I mean, that's right. I mean, one thing always leads to another. If you find evidence of one baseball club, well, it's because they're playing another baseball club.
Yeah.
And it's because they're playing in a field, and you have to identify the field, and then you have to identify who are all the players, and you have to identify, you start asking questions about why are they playing there, and so there's just an infinite number of questions that you start asking yourself once you even find what you think is a very basic piece of information.
And those darn rabbit holes. Now, I'm not talking about the rabbit holes on the field. I'm talking about doing those research, and you find something that's interesting to you that follows along your research, and all of a sudden you look down at the bottom right-hand corner of a newspaper page, and there's another rabbit hole that you have to refrain from going down, or if you do, you have to reel yourself back in.
Completely. And some of those rabbit holes have nothing to do with baseball. One of my favorite rabbit holes is there was a baseball club that was mentioned in, I think, 1867, maybe, or 1868 convention. And it was called the Storm Baseball Club, STURM. And I wondered, who is Storm? I found out who the man was, and turned out he was a bigamist, a fraud, perhaps a murderer, and a local businessman in Knoxville who ended up pretending he was a doctor and moving to Michigan and running and again being accused of murder for killing one of his patients. And so, just trying to find out more about these people, and even if it has nothing to do with baseball at all, I spend months on these rabbit holes, learning about Tennessee politics at the time, learning about the social aspects of history, learning about the racial tensions at the time, and you end up becoming an expert on topics that you did not even consider that were even part of your research topic.
Chris, this has been great. I'm so glad that you and I got together. For those who are listening, you've been listening to Chris Ryland. I hope you enjoyed his story. I hope you learned something about 19th century baseball. If you stuck with us, I think you did. And I think you appreciate, like I do, his research, his talents, his taking the time to dig as he has dug into not only 19th century baseball, but other things as he just described. Chris, thank you for being a part of this. I am just so grateful that we were able to do it, and I look forward to doing it again when we can revisit this subject.
Well, thanks so much, Skip, for inviting me on. I had a wonderful time.
I
And
did
happy to
too.
come back.
Good. And for those that are listening, as always, I appreciate that. Thank you for listening.